Hey everybody, this is Ben with Devslopes.com, and in this video we're going to talk a little bit about our map and how to make this more efficient and user-friendly and overall better. You'll notice I've got the game started, so Mapbox has loaded, and it's paused so we can take a good look at everything without being distracted. And what you'll see in front of you is a big old sea of green. And what is this green? Each of those are objects. Each of them have been generated by Mapbox because we don't have really very many filters set up. So it's generating everything that Mapbox knows of in the area, which in some cases is really great. For our purposes, not so much. So we can adjust that. We briefly touched on the filters when we were setting up points of interest and setting up these buildings to begin with, but this is another place where they really come in handy. We can go in and eliminate a whole bunch of this green and all of these extra objects by setting our filters properly. Normally, you'd want these grouped, and that would help save on a lot of this. And it saves processing power, makes things a lot lighter, quicker. However, since we want individual buildings, we can't really do that option. And if we take a look just at one of these sections, if we go into our map holder, map root, let's just select this very first one. It's out in the distance and it's not even in the visible range. And you'll notice there's a whole bunch. There are so many buildings attached to this. See how that's a little inefficient? Well, we can fix it. So let's do that. The first step that we're going to take is we're going to go to a familiar website. So follow me to mapbox.com/studio. And we're going to go visit an old friend, our Drenches of War map that we created forever ago. We're going to go into it. Now let me preface this by saying that the changes that we make here aren't going to make much difference in terms of what's extruded and what's not in the 3D space. However, this can give us a really, really good idea of where we want to be. I've already plugged in the coordinates, but we want to change our map position. We want a latitude of 37.783711 and a longitude of -122.401371. The reason being, that's where our map in the game currently is. So we can get a bird's eye view of our map and really quickly distinguish what we want and what we don't. How can we do that? Let's click on the building. This building tab has a portion called Select Data. And you'll remember that from when we set up our filters to take out hospitals, public buildings, and schools. We're going to take this a couple steps further, and we're going to use this tool to determine what we want and what we want to take out of here so that our map is less cluttered, it's not generating nearly as much stuff, and it's easier to view, maintain, render, and so much easier for the user's device to handle. So if we go into the filters, you can say add filter, and there are a few different options that we've got. You can set whether it can be extruded or not, the set height, a minimum height, a type, or whether or not it's underground. Now we've played around with the type, and underground is pretty self-explanatory. But a good, easy way for us to narrow down what's showing up is if we go to min height. If we add an empty here, we can type in a number, and based on the height of the building, it'll either show or not. For example, if we put in 0, obviously we have all of these same buildings because they're all at least 0 units high. However, if I go and change this to, say, 35, it's not going to show anything right now because of the filter setting. It's looking for a minimum height of 35 right now. But we can change this to whether it has a minimum height, does not have a minimum height, is any of, which is what we're currently on, is not, which is exclusion, is greater than, less than, or greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So let's change this to greater than or equal to and see where 35 units puts us. Okay, so a min height is not really working out for us. That very well could be because a lot of these buildings have a minimum height of 0. So they're just not set. Let's instead go ahead and trash this filter, and let's add a filter, add the height, and then we can say is greater than or equal to, add it, and we'll type in 35 and see where that puts us. Cool. That's looking a lot better. Much less cluttered, a lot less buildings, still enough that we can get the grasp that this is a city and there are buildings around, but not so much that it's cluttered and busy and overbearing. Let's maybe even drop this a little and see where 25 puts us. Okay, we've got a few more, but not a whole ton more. Well, I guess there are quite a few. Let's leave this at 35. And that's just perfect. Looking at the data this way gives us a really easy glimpse into what we can do in our Unity setup to achieve this kind of effect, to get less buildings, have it be less cluttered and easier to manage. So let's take what we've learned here and go back to Unity. Let's stop this from running and click on Map Root. And let's hit up the Extruded Buildings layer visualizer. We can then come down here. Let's stretch this out a bit so we can see it easier. We can then come down here. Let's go ahead and add a new empty filter. And for this one, we're going to change the key to height. And then we'll change the operator to is less. And we're going to type in that magic number we looked at earlier of 35. Since this combiner type is none, we want to make sure that we're including none of the buildings that we want. So in this case, it would be any building with a height less than 35. Perfect. With that, let's shrink this guy back down, press play, and see where that puts us. Pause. And this is looking so much better. We've got a few points of interest that can be hit here. We've got tanks landing, and there's a nice big open space here, and enough buildings to where it's going to be a challenge, but not so many that it's overwhelming and that the device is going to have any issues. That's great. Let's click and see, while we've still got quite a few out here in the outlying regions, it's not nearly as bad as it was. So the question is, what can we do about this? Well, there are certain tools that Mapbox has available to us that we can use to fix those outlying buildings, but at this point, I'm not too personally worried about them. I mean, let's hit play again. Really, this isn't very much overhead for the game. However, if we did want to get rid of this, one option is this Disposed Buffer at the AR table tile provider. And as we decrease this, it will take down the size of this orange square, and it'll actually dispose of everything in these outlying regions. For example, if we stop running and then change this buffer to 1 and run again, you'll see that this orange square has shrunk by a lot. However, it's also cutting off a bit of our map, which isn't quite what we want. So let's change this back to 3. One other way that we could easily take care of this, if you really wanted to go for it, would be to write a script and attach that as a game object modifier and check and see if an object is visible. And if it's not visible, then destroy it. A little bit of extra work, but if you're really worried about efficiency, that's one way you could go. I, however, am just fine with where we're at. Our map now looks a lot cleaner, much simpler, and is a lot less graphics intense, which is really great for us on a lot of levels, especially where we're dealing with mobile, because that'll save the user battery life, processing power, and provide an overall better experience. And that's just another way that the Mapbox filters over here in our layer visualizer can be a super useful tool, and especially paired with Mapbox Studio, can help us to improve our game in lots of ways dynamically. So go out there, play with the filters a little bit, and find something that's just perfect for the way that you want your map. Half of the fun of game development is experimenting anyways, so just go do it. In this video, we've learned a little bit more about the filters. We've learned another feature that they can provide for us, and we've learned how to cut down a lot of the overhead that Mapbox Studio can have if we're not careful with our filters. Great job following along. I'm going to go ahead and save, and then update collab, added height filter, publish now. This is Ben with Devslopes.com, and we'll see you next time.